Hi, everyone, and welcome to this Q&A session for the wonderful movie Born to Be part of the queer selection at the 28th Raindance Film Festival. We're so thrilled to be joined by Tania Cypriano, who is the director of the movie. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And so hopefully we'll be joined by the subject of the film, Dr. Ting, who's a busy person, so hopefully he'll be able to join us later on during the Q&A. So first of all, I need to say I absolutely loved that movie so much. I found it really, really moving, really important. And so I want to say thank you for sharing it for making it and for sharing that with us. So how did that subject matter come to you as a filmmaker? Was it through, did you have an interest in the topic of, the transgender community and the hardships that they face, or was it entirely different?
Well, I do have a history of making documentaries that deal with health and communities. I had already done about 4 different films on subject of health, and I think maybe the most well-known one was like a documentary that I follow, a HIV/AIDS campaign that is taking place in houses of worship of Candomblé in Brazil. So Michelle Hayashi, the producer, she was looking for somebody to be able to join her and work on this documentary. It was her original idea. She had met Dr. Ting, and once she heard about the center just starting and what it meant to that community, she was very, very touched by it, and wanted to, and thought that maybe a documentary would be able to not only bring information to that community, and to say that hope was coming, and also because we were living at kind of a historical time here in New York, since those surgeries were just made available to people through Obamacare. And so she approached me about directing, and as soon as I met, not just Dr. Ching, but everybody at that center, I was like, I would love to tell this story.
And so, yeah, it comes sort of that center in New York, which focuses specifically on gender confirmation surgeries and physical care and surgeries for the transgender community, was just being created as well. And that was also his first foray into sort of that community and that work. And so did he have any reservations about being followed? Because it's very sensitive work that he's doing. Right. Did he have any reservations about being followed around by film crew?
Well, the idea in the beginning was that when Michelle introduced me to Dr. Ching, was that he was actually just somebody that was going to be able to introduce us to the director of the hospital and help us getting access inside of the center and also the surgery room. But as soon as I went in there with our cameraman, I was like, this doctor needs to be part of this film. I also really felt that it was a way that that would enable me as a cisgender woman, like to be able to go into that world. It was like through him, and and being able to explain to larger audiences that don't know anything about what surgical transitioning means, that was that he was a kind of like a leeway, a person that would be able to take you in and out of stories and also explain things to people, because as you see in the film, through the process of film, we were filming while he was learning a lot of this,
yes.
the surgeries. So it just felt the right way to do it, to follow somebody like him. of course, there are all sorts of, surprises that happens afterwards. But yes, in the beginning, he was very, very reserved and was not sure about being part of the film. He really wanted it to be about the patients. But I think that the balance is there. You can have both, I think that that's also what I hear from people that has made the film, special is that you do get to be able to be on both sides of the story,
Yeah. And I mean, I think, yeah, you're right. There is that balance of clearly the Dr. Ting is sort of the audience's way into this world as he was more or less discovering himself. But then, he's really the center of gravity of the film. But then the heart of the film is really all those patients who are, funny, vivacious, striving, and, have all those big personalities and sort of are really striving for something significant in their lives, and we get to know them a little bit in a way. And so for you, just in terms of finding the right approach to those patients, because obviously it's a very significant and sensitive sort of procedures that they're having done. So how were they just with respect to being filmed and sort of having those crucial moments recorded?
Well, we had two different situations. One was just, when we were there at the clinic and we would meet people that were coming in, for a consultation. And then there were actually the people that we then, follow thoroughly, like, some of them from the first consultation and then, through the process of going through surgery and everything. The clinic was extremely helpful. The people that work with Dr. Jess Ting, they were extremely helpful with us. Like, what they would do is, like, the day before we would go there with our cameras, they would actually let patients know that there was going to be a film crew, and would ask, who would be interested in being, filmed or not. And so once I would arrive over there, with Jeffrey Johnson, the cinematographer, like, we sort of already knew who was going to be filmed or not. And sometimes people changed their minds, people that said yes would say no, or the opposite. It was very important. I had to make sure. Some people would say, you can film me, but not show my face. And I felt very strongly that I needed people's identity fully to be there, because there's always a sense of if you kind of hide the face, that person is either like taking a risk, or is being.
No.
Oh, here we have somebody. Oh.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm in the OR. I'm just coming out of the OR so I can talk to you guys.
Oh my God, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm like, are you sure?
How's it going? Yeah, all good. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm Baptiste. I'm one of the programmers here at Raindance. So yeah, no, we're just talking about the film and about sort of the work of your work with the patients, as well as the film crew's work with the patients. So yeah, to begin with, for you, how was it like to sort of do your job with the film crew around?
I'm kind of a shy person, so it was very hard. But after like 2 weeks, then I just stopped caring, and then I just got used to it.
And so obviously, we're discussing this is obviously a very sensitive and intimate moments in the lives of your patients. It's really significant events. And so we're just talking about sort of that relationship that the film crew had with the patients. And so did that add any sort of pressure on you with regards to your work, having the crew there?
I mean, just logistically, it was just a little tricky. But, Tania, our director, and Michelle Hayashi, the producer, they were great at so warm, they're such warm people. And just great at establishing a rapport with patients. And that just made everything else easy. And they were very good at being unobtrusive. So after a while, I just learned to block out the cameras. And sometimes I would even forget that they were there.
And so what's really amazing about the film is that, you know, you're very transparent about the fact that for you, it was a fairly new field that you were entering at the time. And sort of certainly in terms of the work with the transgender community that you were doing. And so, you know, surgeons and sort of doctors generally have this really good ability of sort of distancing themselves from sort of the patients in a way and just focus on the work. But was there any point for you, or several points in fact, where for you discovering sort of the hardships of that community and sort of the significance of what you were doing, was it difficult for you to remove yourself from that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it definitely affected me. I would take things home with me. I've had a couple of patients pass away, and that was really, really hard. Or just to see the struggles that our patients have. Sometimes we'd have what I would call successful surgeries, and then to see the struggles that the patients continue to have. Very painful, really, really difficult to see. Makes me feel just helpless, right?
Yeah.
Surgeons can be sort of godlike. We feel like we can do anything, but then it's very humbling to realize that surgery can go great, but what we do is just one small aspect of our patients' lives. And if everything else is still very challenging, then it doesn't even matter if the surgery went fantastically. If your patient is homeless, being discriminated against, being assaulted, suffering violence and discrimination, then what we do becomes negated.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also one of the strengths of the film that it does not shy away from that your work is, you know, however significant, and it is extremely significant and beautiful, but also comes as part of a sort of wider puzzle of also the lives of the patients, and the physical care that you provide needs to be complemented by mental health care. Which I felt was really, you know, really bold.
And an accepting society. I mean, I think that that's also like a society that understands what we're, you know, what we're talking about. That's, for me, it was like, you know, thinking about, like, it was such an important thing to talk, because, you know, that we speak about change and how change needs to come, but it's like, you know, I really believe that and you know, that if change come, if society would be more educated and interested in being educated, which is something,
Yes.
you know, we lack so much nowadays, is of people, you know, that are interested on getting through education. I think that we would not be where we are, and a lot of transgender people would not be, you know, suffering as much as they are. Like, you know, like Jess just said, I mean, it's like, you know, you see these people going home after surgeries. A lot of them don't have families, or don't have a home, you know, don't have home and families to take care of them.
Yeah.
That's not cool.
And so, I mean, also what's really beautiful to see is that sort of you're pioneering this work, and you're finding sort of new ways to improve the surgeries that you're doing, but you're also training new people to follow in your footsteps and do this valuable work. And so since the film has been sort of in the can, so to speak, how has that grown since then?
Right. So Bella Avanesian, my fellow, the first transgender surgery fellow, she's now my partner, and she's very busy, and she has a huge following, and she's becoming quite famous herself. The fellow who did the fellowship a year after her, his name is John Pang. He's also my partner. And so we've grown from one surgeon, and we have another surgeon, Frank Fang. So there are four of us.
Oh, that's the joys of being live.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've grown. Our wait list is way, way down. We took a hit because of COVID. We stopped operating for 4 months, and the hospital became a COVID hospital. So now we're playing catch up. But
Yeah.
right before COVID, we'd gotten our wait list down to about 3 months. And that's from starting at over a year.
Wow.
So
Well,
huge
that's-
progress.
Yeah, that's really, really fantastic. And sort of elsewhere in the US, are there sort of other people that could then follow in your footsteps, or other institutions?
Right. Well, my current fellow, Nikki Burish, is going to probably South Carolina. So I'm hoping she'll start a program there. You know, the South really doesn't have very many places where trans, non-binary people have access to care. And yeah, have you talked about the election today? Yesterday was election day. We still don't know. I was pulling my hair out last night thinking that it looked like in the early returns that Trump is winning, but I think that things are
Seems to be
changing.
shifting a little.
The momentum is changing. Yeah, I think Biden may pull out a win.
Yeah,
Thank God.
keeping.
That will help access to care for
Yeah.
our patients.
Yeah, well, especially it's not just in terms of policy, but also in terms of the rhetoric that the current president has had as well, in the measures about trans people
Yes.
serving in the military and those types of things. That's extremely harmful as well.
Yes, it's very destructive. It's caustic.
Yeah, and so in the first instance, so we talked a little bit about sort of working with the crew, but why did you decide to be filmed, to accept being filmed in the first place, doing your work?
Well, this all came about because I would go home and tell my dear friend Michelle Hayashi, the producer, these stories. And when I told her that one of my patients had killed himself, this was before we even started, it was her idea to make a movie. And in the beginning, we were just going to film patients. And so that was the original goal. We went out, we bought a camera, we found some seed funding, and we just started filming. And Tania and Michelle were just like, oh, no, you have to be in it. It can't, this movie cannot exist without you in it. So yeah, I agreed.
Well,
for better or worse.
Well, I would tend to concur with the filmmakers on that. I think just showcasing the work that you're doing is really, really fantastic, and it's really valuable. And so, yeah, thank you for agreeing to do that. And so, just in terms of maybe Tania, so we talked sort of about the distance with the patients, finding the right sort of distance with them and the right level of proximity with them. But was there any point when you yourself and other people in the crew just thought, personally, this is a bit too much to handle, I wish I wasn't there for that?
No, I mean, I was very, very lucky to be working with Jeffrey Johnson. I mean, besides being an incredible cinematographer, he actually, he really fell in love with the project. He really understood its importance. And he also was not, and he was a strong guy. I mean, a lot of people, there were times when something was happening and we had to jump and go and film. And if Jeff was not available, it was not easy to find a substitute or another camera person, because not everybody wants to go inside of a surgery room, and see the procedure. So, but there was, but there was nothing, and actually the very first surgery that we do, that we filmed, is the one that we show in the film. It was like, mahogany. So, having the facial feminization. So that was a bit hardcore for us to be there and watch, but being the first one. So, not only Dr. Ting was nervous, everybody was nervous on that day. And, but I feel like that, no, there's actually, if anything, I mean, there are things that have happened to some of the people in the film that, where I couldn't be there and I wish I was there for, because, I fell in love with every single one of them. And, and they have become part of my life too, and so it's, but they, there's still a lot of struggles. They all have different struggles, but they're still all, like everybody else. And I think that right now, during this period of COVID, it's become even more difficult for people and for the community around them. As Dr. Ting just said, it's like people that had their surgeries scheduled and then they have to be postponed. and then having, you know, a president that keeps threatening, taking the ability for them to take care of themselves, you know, or have, you know, safe healthcare, you know, towards them. So it's been a tough time for people here.
And so in terms of your collaboration together, at what point did you sort of decide, how did the collaboration go sort of throughout? Because it's obviously quite an adventure. And sort of, were you always clear as to what the common goal was for the project?
I mean, Michelle Hagashi was the mediator. I mean, she was a lot, you know, talking between the two of us. And, but I feel that from the very beginning, we did have the same exact goal. I think that how to achieve it was a little bit different. And it took a while, I think, that not just for Jess, but also for even for Michelle to understand that, like, you know, so she wanted so much to make a film that would help this community. And I kept saying, you know, the way I see that this community will really benefit from this film is if, like, we can actually speak to larger audiences, because like, I think that you know, outside people need to know about it, because if we are good, what we were talking before, you know, that if we have a better educated society on the subject, then things, you know, might be able to start changing the way that, you know, people are treated. There's a lot of, you know, I mean, how many women this year alone have been killed, you know, in the United States. It's a very, very big problem, you know. I come from a country where this is even worse. I mean, Brazil, you know, I mean, trans people, like, there's no other country in the world, I think, that kill more transgender people than Brazil. So it's,
Yeah. And Dr. Ting, so in terms of, so you said you're a rather shy person and sort of perhaps don't like to be at the center of attention. But how has the experience of making the film and sort of spreading the word about the film and participating in Q&As like this and sort of spreading the word about the film, what's that been like for you?
I mean, it was an adjustment. Yeah. I mean, I'm still not used to it. I still get nervous when I'm filmed or for an interview, but it's getting a little easier over time. And we'll see. I hope this movie goes far and wide, because the power of film to change minds and change people's viewpoint is unparalleled by any other medium. So I'm hoping many people will see it and understand about the trans experience.
Yeah, well, I think it's absolutely a film that deserves to have that journey and that wide viewership. So we're very happy to be able to participate in sort of spreading the good word about the film and your work. And so just before we wrap up, so obviously setting up this sort of this practice at the hospital and sort of training new people is really essential, and it's really, really fantastic. But where do you see the next steps? What do you see the next steps that are needed are?
Train more surgeons, open programs around the country. So many of my patients travel from far away to have surgery. Sorry for the background noise, but improving that access to care so people can go to a local hospital.
Yeah.
And then I can retire. I'll go back to being a musician. That's my plan.
That's the goal.
That's my goal.
But also you said in the movie that you found sort of by doing sort of branching out into the work you do with the transgender community, you found a renewed meaning in your work as well.
Yes, when I was starting, I think I was definitely a little burnt out, maybe sort of just jaded and not just had gotten away from my roots for going into medicine, which were always to help. And, you know, plastic surgery can be very elitist. And I think that was a little bit of my practice. Here I feel like it's just more grassroots, helping people at every level of the world.
Well, you know, I think that's all we can wish for you, is to actually that what you do becomes so widespread that you can eventually retire, and that you're not the only one that's needed, and you can play your bass more, not just on the weekend. So yeah, I think we'll wrap up here. But thank you both so much for making this film. Again, as I said, sort of personally, I think it's genuinely extremely important, and it's a really beautiful movie. And so yeah, so deepest thanks for that. And thank you both so much for joining us today to discuss this. Really very appreciated and honored. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
England.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Everyone catch up. The next screening is tomorrow. Make sure to catch up on it and tell your friends until then.